Good morning, everyone. So, we begin our last semester of our classes today. The title of our session is Climbing Towards Theosis. Thank you. So we continue this notion of theosis, becoming one with God. I'd like to read with you the gospel in Luke. Jesus appears on the road to Emmaus. If you like to open the Bibles that are in the pews, you can join me as well. It's Luke chapter 24, verse 13 to 35. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they walked together of all these things which had happened. So it was while they conversed and reasoned that Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, "What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" Then one of those whose name was Cleopas answered and said to him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known all the things which had happened in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" So they said to him, "The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things have happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who had arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, "O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all that prophets have spoken, ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory?" And beginning at Moses and the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scripture the things concerning himself. Then they drew near to a village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone farther. But they constrained him, saying, "Abide, for it is towards evening, and the day is far spent." And he who went in to stay with them. And now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us?" So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord is risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." And they told about the things that had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. So, one of the themes in this story is the Eucharist. How often do we think about the meaning of the Eucharist, of the liturgy? What does it mean to us? Has its meaning evolved during your life? How can our lives be Eucharistic? What does this mean? Together, the Eucharist and the Eucharistic life form a movement, the movement from resentment to gratitude. And that is from a hardened heart to a grateful heart. The Eucharist expresses the spiritual movement in a very, very succinct way. The Eucharistic life is one in which we are invited to experience and affirm this movement in every day and in everything, all of our experiences. What we celebrate, the Eucharist, and what we are called to live, the Eucharistic life, are one and the same. So I just read again the Gospel of Luke about the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. When have you felt like the two people on this road? We saw them, one Cleopas and we don't know the other, talking together, and we saw that they weren't happy. They didn't look at each other. They sometimes uttered a word but not directed to each other, although they followed the same path which they were walking, but they had no goal. They had no clue. They thought something was happening, and then, if you will, the carpet was pulled from under their feet. So they couldn't see this goal. They don't even remember Christ, who appeared to them, gathered them together, who changed their lives, radically interrupted their daily activities, and brought a new vitality to every part of their experience and existence. They left their village, they followed that stranger, Christ, and discovered a whole new reality behind the veil of their ordinary activities, a reality in which forgiveness, healing, and love were no longer mere words, but powers touching the very core of their humanity, their very heart. The stranger from Nazareth, Christ, made everything new to them. He made them into people for whom the world was no longer a burden, but a challenge. No longer a field of snares, but a place with endless opportunity. He had brought joy and peace to their daily experience. Do I dare to say that we are very, very, very much alike, us and these two apostles? We know it, I believe, when we look into ourselves and encounter there our lostness. Aren't we lost too? If there's any word that well summarizes our pain, it is the word loss. We have lost so much. Sometimes it even seems that life is just one long series of losses. For example, when we were born, we lost the safety of the womb. When we went to school, we lost the security of our family life. When we got our first job, we lost the freedom of our youth. When we got married or ordained, we lost many joys, many joyous opportunities. When we grew and got old, we lost our looks, our old friends, and our fame. When we became ill, we lost our physical independence. And guess what? When we die, we lose it all. So I guess I could say loss is a part of our everyday life. The losses that settle themselves deeply in our hearts and the minds of the loss of intimacy through separation, the loss of safety through violence, the loss of innocence through abuse, the loss of friends through betrayal, and the list goes on. We can't escape these losses. The loss of conviction that our life has meaning. For a time, we're able to bear losses, even to live with them with fortitude and perseverance, because we live them as losses that would bring us closer to God. The pain and suffering of our life were bearable because we live them as ways to test our willpower and deepen our conviction. But as we grew older, we discovered that what supported us for so many years, prayer, worship, the sacraments, community life, and the clear knowledge of God's guiding truth, It lost its grip on us. We no longer think of Him, God, very much at all. We no longer desire to spend hours in His presence, prayer. We no longer have this special feeling for Him. Like the two disciples said after that meal, did not our hearts burn within us while He opened to us the Scriptures? At that point, they realized they lost something. They lost the presence of Christ in their life. So how do we deal with our losses? I don't know if I'll give you all the answers, but maybe I can offer some insight. So what do we do with them? Do we hide them? Are we going to live as if they weren't real, kind of forget about them? Are we going to blame someone else for our losses? We do most of these things all the time, but do we ever mourn our losses? We can't talk or act them away, but we can shed tears over them and allow ourselves to grieve deeply. To grieve is to allow our losses to tear apart feelings of security and safety and lead us to cry. Why do we have to feel this loss? Why do we have to make it known to ourselves, this separation? Our grief makes us experience the abyss of our own life in which nothing is settled. And we don't like doing that. We don't like looking inside ourselves. In the midst of all our pain, there's a voice of He who says in Matthew chapter 5, we read the Beatitudes. One of the verses is, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." There's some unexpected news here. And that there's a blessing hidden within our grief. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The unexpected news is that we're going to be comforted. I don't think it's rocket science. I mean, just listen to the words. We're going to be comforted. We're going to have that expectation. We should have that expectation, and we're going to have that fulfillment if we allow ourselves to grieve and understand and look into ourselves at our brokenness. We're going to be comforted. It's not those who comfort are blessed. It's those who mourn are blessed. Somehow, in the midst of all our tears, a gift is hidden. Somehow, the cries that well up from our losses belong to our songs of gratitude. So I spoke about gratitude. Now, how does gratitude relate to the Eucharist and the Eucharistic life? We come to the Eucharist, the liturgy, with our hearts broken by many losses, our own and hopefully of the world and of others. The question is whether our losses lead to resentment or gratitude. Resentment is a real option that many take. But the Eucharist, on the other hand, presents us another option, and that's gratitude. Mourning our losses is the first step that takes us away from resentment and towards gratitude. The tears of our grief can soften our hearts, our hardened hearts, and open us to the possibility to say thanks. Eucharistia is the act of thanksgiving, being thankful. So, to celebrate the Eucharist and to live a Eucharistic life has everything to do with being thankful, to being grateful. living Eucharistically, isn't that a tongue twister? Eucharistically, Eucharist, living thankfully, is living a life as a gift for which one is grateful. We have heard yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, and today is the present, hence why it's called a gift. I don't want to beat that dead horse. But if we live gratefully, we live our life as a gift to be thankful for. Aren't we thankful for gifts when we receive them? Aren't we happy when okay, maybe we're happy when we receive things that we want, but are we also happy when we receive things that we don't necessarily want, don't like, don't need? But the important thing is to be grateful for that, to be thankful for those who have brought whatever it is they've brought to you, to the community. Living that Eucharistic life, living the liturgy every day throughout your life, throughout our lives. However, I guess, to be a little realistic here, gratitude isn't the most obvious response to life. And especially when we experience life as a series of losses. How can we be grateful for things that we lose? Still, the great mystery, which we celebrate together in the Eucharist, Christ's incarnation, death, and resurrection, and live in a Eucharistic life, is exactly that. Through the mourning of our losses, we come to know life as a gift. We begin the liturgy with cries for God's mercy. Lord, have mercy. How many times do we say, Lord, have mercy? I don't know the number, but we say, Lord, have mercy a lot. This cry for mercy is possible only when we are willing to confess that somehow, somewhere, we ourselves have something to do with our losses. Again, that goes back with blaming others for our losses, putting them behind ourselves and not confronting them. Crying for mercy is a recognition that blaming God, the world, or others for our losses does not do full justice to the truth of who we are. At the moment, we are willing to take responsibility, even for the pain we didn't cause directly, converting it into an acknowledgement of our own role in human brokenness. So, celebrating the Eucharist, celebrating the liturgy, celebrating Thanksgiving requires that we stand in this world accepting our co-responsibilities for the evil that surrounds us and pervades us. Well, how are we responsible for wars? How are we responsible for thefts? How are we responsible for the homeless? How are we responsible for epidemics? How are we responsible for stock market crashes? Well, aren't we all responsible, have a responsibility to help one another in one way or another? How many times do we hear that we're responsible for the person sitting next to us? If anything, we should be responsible for their spiritual well-being, because I'm here, and Father Chris, as we are here, as your spiritual guides, you have an equally important role to being responsible for each other as well. Without you, we can't exist. Without us, you can't exist. And as long as we remain stuck in our complaints about the terrible times in which we live, suffer, and bear, and the terrible fate that comes to us, we can never come to contrition. And contrition can only grow out, well, go figure, a contrite heart. And contrite heart does not blame, but acknowledges its own part in the sinfulness of the world, and so has been made ready to receive God's mercy. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. A contrite heart will not despise. Psalm 50. If we allow our hearts, take that shell. Here's a good connection. What do we do at Pascha? I just said shell. We crack eggs. Why are we cracking the eggs? To remember, experience Christ breaking out of the tomb. How do we long to break these eggs with one another and to say, ha, I win. No, you got to turn it over. This is the head, this is the back. No, you got to do it right. Why aren't we as fervent in breaking the shells of our hearts? To allow others in, to allow our brokenness to come out, to allow, if anything else, Christ to enter into us. To finish, the saint that we celebrate today, Gregory of Palamas, is one of those great, is another great role model for us. As I said on Friday night, the Mother of God is the ideal role model for us because she accepted Christ without a question. Today we remember St. Gregory Palamas on the second Sunday of Lent, to see how his spiritual discernment practices brought him to see, as we hear, the invisible, uncreated light of God. So I leave you with, if we open our hearts, if we allow ourselves to become vulnerable, we then allow ourselves to grow even further. It's not just age. It's about spiritual well-being. It's about communion. It's about community. It's about mourning our losses, understanding that blessed gift that we will be saved. Thank you again, and good morning.